Hello, folks. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me again here on the Lore of the Ring. I apologize. Last week I had to apologize because the episode was late. I had some issues there. This week I'm going to apologize because of my voice. I've been under the weather, been dealing with some sickness, still a little congested, got a cough. So I apologize and ask that you bear with me. Here we are, another episode. I've got more good feedback. I appreciate everyone who's been tuning in, telling friends, sharing the love. So the poll winner for this episode was WCW, the Great American Bash 1998. So let's don't waste any time. Ring the bell. It's June 14th, 1998. We're in Baltimore, Maryland, in the Baltimore Arena. And this is the quote-unquote home of the Bash, the Great American Bash. This arena in this city hosted the Great American Bash in 1988, 89, 90, 91. Then they took a few years off and traveled. But then they came back for 96, came back in 98, 99, and the last ever WCW Great American Bash in the year 2000. So I really like this. I've gone back and forth on this. Like, I don't think it would work for WrestleMania. I think WrestleMania should be a traveling attraction. The Royal Rumble should probably be a traveling attraction. But a staple pay-per-view, like maybe a SummerSlam, maybe a Survivor Series, or maybe it's not a staple big pay-per-view for WWE, but what if a company had a home arena and home city for one particular pay-per-view? I think that's a great concept, because then you could set your calendar every year and just you could have families planning their vacations, be like, okay, this year, this month, where we're going. And I don't know. I think that's a cool opportunity that WWE maybe misses out on. They could take advantage of. Anyway, let's not get too far sidetracked. In this event, we got a sellout crowd, 12,810 fans on hand. Great crowd. They were loud. They were vocal. They were engaged in the show, and so you got to love that. This was a co-branded event from WCW and NWO. Remember when we did 1997 Sold Out pay-per-view that I said that it was kind of a trial run. It was branded as an NWO exclusive pay-per-view. Well, that's the only one that got branded exclusively as NWO. And then they went to this dual branded pay-per-views with WCW and the NWO. So that's where we are here. Let's set the scene. In the past on these episodes, I've kind of been giving you the backstories and the rivalries, like when we get to that match on the card. But I'm going to try to do something a little different. Let me give you the climate, the situation that was on hand in WCW at the time up front. That way when we get to the matches, we'll just get to the matches. So at the time, the NWO has split. And here's the thing. As a kid, I loved the NWO Wolfpack. And to this day, their theme song is one of the best ever. I'm not saying the best ever in WCW. I'm saying one of the best wrestling themes ever is the Wolfpack. But looking back, I hate the NWO split. It doesn't make the red and black shirt any less cool. It doesn't make me, hate some of the guys that were in the Wolfpack. I think that the Wolfpack would have been a cool sub concept, kind of like how you had the Elite was a subgroup of the Bullet Club. Do something like that, but to split and cause this civil war, it just kind of dilutes it. The NWO lost its luster. They started letting any and everyone in. It no longer felt like a threat to WCW. It just felt like something that was there. And, in no world, in no situation should Dusty Rhodes, Disco Inferno, Horace Hogan, or Sting, none of those guys should have ever been in the NWO. Disco and Horace because they sucked. Dusty and Sting should have never been in NWO because for so long, they were just strong anti-NWO advocates for WCW. And I'm Dusty, I'm not saying Dusty was in the Wolfpack, but I'm saying once the NWO stopped feeling exclusive, what's the point? What's the point? It just got way too convoluted, way too muddied, and it just didn't work anymore. Anyway, off that tangent. Tensions were high at this time between Nash and Hogan. And then on the April 20th Nitro, Nash told Hogan to have a nice life, hinting that they were done as a group. And he ended up hitting Hogan with a jackknife later in the show. And it was all but official. NWO Civil War. Then on the May 4th Nitro, the famous black and red NWO shirts debuted when Nash, Macho Man Randy Savage, and Conan wore them to the ring, and they called themselves the Wolfpack. They were the babyface NWO faction. Why? Why did the NWO need a babyface faction? I get it, you're selling a lot of merch, so you want to try to capitalize on it even more. But sometimes the heels are the cool guys. Look at Stone Cold Steve Austin. He made it cool to be a bad guy. MJF in current wrestling. He's a cool bad guy. You don't need to turn on babyface. You don't need to have a babyface faction. That's what the WCW was. They were the babyface faction. And I know you had heels in WCW as well. But what I'm saying is anyone that wanted to challenge the NWO and go against Hollywood Hogan, they should be under the WCW banner. Anyway, I keep getting fired up about that. I don't want to get too hot. Let's relax. So fast forward now to Slamboree. Hall and Nash, the outsiders, they're set to face the Giant and Sting, who were under the WCW banner at this time, for the tag titles. Hall had been out since March, but he returned wearing Wolfpack colors with Nash. And during this time, I'm not sure. Honestly, I couldn't find it. But I think that Hall was out at this time because he was dealing with a lawsuit. Jerry Saggs from the Nasty Boys was suing the WCW and Scott Hall. And so this is speculation. I don't know for a fact, but I think that's why they kept him off TV, is why they got that settled. Saggs felt that Scott took some liberties with him and was dangerous and tried to hurt him, so he sued. And I think that's why that Scott Hall was off TV behind the scenes. But anyway, so he's back now. He's wearing the Wolfpack colors. Before the show, the Giant actually joined NWO Hollywood, which is what the black and white faction of the NWO was called. So he's opposite of the Wolfpack now, and he's trying to convince Sting to do the same. Join me in Hollywood. Both sides are kind of recruiting him. During the match, Hall turned on Nash though, and Sting and Giant won the belts. So the next night on Nitro, Hall joined NWO Hollywood. Then a week later, Lex Luger joined the Wolfpack, and he was recruiting his longtime friend Sting to join us over here. So, like I said, NWO Hollywood, they've got their own recruiting efforts put forth, so both sides are trying to get Sting. Who's going to join? But the next week, Sting faked Hollywood out. He turned on him, and he joined the Wolfpack. He had the NWO black and white shirt on, took it off, turned on him, joined the Wolfpack. I said all that to say this. The main event of this show is a weird stipulation. Sting and the Giant are the tag team champions, but the main event of Great American Bash 1998 is a singles match between Sting and Giant, and the winner gets possession of the belts, gets sole possession, and can pick their own partner. I mean, I don't hate that concept, honestly. It's interesting. It's different. Definitely different. So some other storylines at the time. Booker T and Chris Benoit, they had been having a best of 7 series to determine the number 1 contender spot for Fit Finley's WCW title. That's crazy. Best of 7 just for a number 1 contender spot at the TV title. Like a C tier title. But these are 2 great hot acts. So yeah, let's put them in the ring week in, week out on Nitro, on Thunder, whatever, because they're going to give us great matches. Best of 7, sure. Why not? Benoit had cost Booker the title to Finley on the May 4th Nitro. And the winner of the best of 7 match would get the title shot at the Great American Bash. Match 7 technically happened on Thunder a few days before this pay-per-view, but Bret Hart interfered. He hit Booker T with a chair when the ref wasn't looking, but Chris Benoit refused to win that way. So he didn't want to win that way. Booker T said he respected that. He wanted one more match to finally set it. Match 7 is going to take place at the Great American Bash. It's going to kick off the pay-per-view. And then the title match that was scheduled for the pay-per-view is still going to take place. So whoever wins the opening bout gets a title match with Fit Finley later in the show. Also at this time, Chris Kanyon, he had ditched the Mortis gimmick, and he'd been feuding with Raven and the Flock. Raven had been telling him that no one takes him seriously and he should join the Flock and let Raven mentor him and guide him to the top. But Kanyon refused, so now they're going to face off at the Bash. Chris Jericho had been complaining since Slamboree that he's a victim of a conspiracy and that he should be the Cruiserweight champion. Back at Slamboree, there was a battle royal for the number 1 contender spot, and it was won by Cyclope, And then after the Battle Royal, Cyclope revealed himself to be Dean Malenko. And then he beat Jericho and won the title. So then Jericho launched a campaign verbally attacking Malenko and talking about it as a conspiracy, trying to goad him into another match because he's the rightful champ. This campaign also included the famous Jericho 1004 holds promo, armbar. So that's some good stuff. Definitely look that up if you don't remember it. And then on Thunder the week before the Bash, Malenko said he'd relinquish the title if it meant he could get Jericho back in the ring. And Commissioner J.J. Dillon agreed, said that's honorable. Sure, he's not going to deny him that. The match was set. Another storyline at the time was Juventud Guerrera. He had been unmasked. He had been targeted by Reese from the Flock. Juvie had had some matches with Kidman and Reese, had interfered and attacked Juvi every time. So now they're going to have a modern day Goliath, David versus Goliath match. And if you don't remember Reese, it's Ron Reese, who is a.k.a. the Yeti. Terrible gimmick, but just a monster of a man. And so if you remember Juventud Guerrera, I meant it when I said David versus Goliath. And the last storyline that we really got going on at the time, Eddie Guerrero, he had been trying to get his nephew Chavo Guerrero to lie, cheat, and steal just like him. Do the family way. Take shortcuts. But Chavo, he didn't want to do it that way. He wanted to do things the right way. Chavo eventually went crazy because Eddie was riding him so hard, and Chavo snapped and wasn't allowed to join the LWO because they thought he was too unstable. He was too much of a threat, and that just sent him over the edge. So they're going to face off on this show as well. So now that we've got the backstory out of the way, let's jump into it. Here we are at Showtime. The show opens with an interesting video package. You've got patriotic music that's interrupted by this chaotic sounding music and a not so epilepsy friendly montage of WCW and NWO wrestlers. It wasn't the best video package that we've seen, but it wasn't terrible, I guess. Tony Schiavone then welcomes us in. We've got a huge pyro package that goes off. It's a very cool looking stage setup. Very fitting for the Great American Bash theme. You got flags everywhere. It's all red, white, and blue. And then Schiavone, Bobby Heenan, and Mike Tenay, they're the broadcast team here. I love this trio. I'm not going to lie. I'm very biased towards this trio. This is my childhood, so big fans of that. And then speaking of my childhood, Mean Gene, he's atop the stage, and he tells the crowd the backstory on the main event match, which also I like. Having an announcer, especially someone as esteemed as Mean Gene Okerlund, having him address the crowd first thing and kind of give the backstory for the main event just makes it have this big fight feel. Really sets the stage for the pay-per-view. It makes it feel like a big deal. I really appreciated that. Then we get a brief recap of the Benoit and Booker T story, which I mentioned earlier. It's time for our first match. So Chris Benoit is out first, and man, he had such a great theme in WCW. Like, everybody remembers his iconic WWE theme, but his WCW theme was underrated. Love that. So it's on my gym workout playlist. It's just a great tune. And then when he gets in the ring, we get a good shot of ring announcer David Penzer behind him, and man, you just got to see this bow tie and cummerbund combo. You want to talk about 90s. So colorful. Shout out David Penzer and his stylist. I like that. Booker T's out next, and it's hilarious to see all these rhythmically challenged fans raising the roof behind him. That's some good stuff. Love Booker T in this era. They do a really good job at painting Booker T as an underdog here. Heenan keeps mentioning, he mentioned it before the match, and he just keeps mentioning it through the match, how Booker spent a lot of time in the trainer's room before the show dealing with his knee, and I think that Booker's really hurting a lot more than he's letting on. Good stuff there. And then during the match, Mike Tenay talks about how Bret Hart and his family trained Benoit, and then Bobby mentions how Stu Hart trained the whole Hart family, but only 3 of them used the litter box. God, I love and miss Bobby Heenan. He's just the best. And then speaking of the best, this is a damn solid match. This is the best opening match we've had on the show in a while, to be honest with you. The crowd is invested, and these two just put forth such a solid effort. Benoit hits the diving headbutt, but he takes too long to pin Booker. Booker turns the tables, hits a couple Harlem sidekicks before landing a missile drop kick from the top rope, and he gets the pinfall victory. 16 minutes and 20 seconds, and Dave Meltzer gave it 3.5 stars in the Wrestling Observer. I think that's a little low. 3.5 stars. I mean, this was a very good match. Technically sound, entertaining, great crowd participation. So I would probably give it honestly about a 4.5. I really thought this was a great match. It's also worth noting, this loss made 5 straight pay-per-view match losses for Chris Benoit, and 7 of his last 8 pay-per-view matches were losses. So Kevin Sullivan was the booker for WCW at the time, or he was one of the bookers, and on the part of the creative team. Did that affect Chris Benoit during this era? Chris Benoit had the relationship with Nancy, who at the time was married to Kevin Sullivan. That's no secret. And it's no secret that Kevin and Chris had their issues as a result of that, and, kind of a known but not known feud going on backstage. But did Kevin Sullivan let that affect how he booked Chris Benoit? I mean, it'd be hard not to. You could certainly understand it. So, but anyway, it was interesting to think about. I don't know the answer to that. Also, worth noting, Eric Bischoff said on his podcast 83 Weeks that he thinks that this match is the best example of in-ring work that WCW had to offer during the Monday Night Wars. So, very high praise from Eric Bischoff for this opener here. After the match, we cut to backstage briefly, and we see Chavo Guerrero. He's talking with Lee Marshall about fighting Eddie for WCW's website, giving a little soundbite there. Then we go back to the arena, and Schiavone throws to David Pinzer, who introduces Saturn. He's set to face Chris Kanyon. It was originally supposed to be Raven versus Kanyon, but Raven subbed in Saturn. Raven's rules, remember. And then Mortis's music hits, and a man walks out dressed as Mortis. But camera cuts back in the ring, and Kanyon had entered the ring, and he's standing behind Saturn waiting to ambush him. He's trying to get a head start on the match, but he doesn't. He just stands there with his arms out and waits until Saturn turns around. Then the bell rings, and then they start. So that was kind of weird. That's a missed opportunity, to be honest with you. But it is what it is. It doesn't hinder the match. Kidman and Lodi, they do a run-in early on, but Kanyon disposes of them very quickly. Then Horace and Riggs run in, and they gang up on him a little. But Saturn does a plancha over the top rope on all 4 guys. Just a good spot. Really served no purpose. Then Nick Patrick, he regains control finally, and he expels the Flock from ringside, so it's just one-on-one again. This match was a lot of fun. These two are so underrated. I love Perry Saturn, love Chris Kanyon. So innovative and just good in the ring. Saturn uses a chair, but not how you'd think. He is an ECW guy, but he doesn't swing it and hit him in the head with a chair. Instead, he pays tribute to another ECW guy, Sabu. He uses it as a springboard to do a triple jump moonsault in the ring. And Schiavone says on commentary he's never seen a move like that, and I really wanted to yell at the TV. Then watch ECW. This is 1998. This is prime ECW time. You could see moves like that regularly. But okay. I'll stop nerding out. I get it. You work for a wrestling company. You can't watch all the other content. The match does go a little long, though. Grows a little stale in the middle, and you can tell that Saturn's a little blown up. He's winded. Both guys are winded, to be honest with you. The finish is weird to me. It takes away from the match a lot. It sees 2 guys come to the ring dressed as Mortis, and they start fighting each other. Okay? As they fight on the outside of the ring, Kanyon hits the reverse Russian leg sweep and gets the pinfall win. But what was the run-in for? After the bell, one of the guys dressed as Mortis DDTs Kanyon on the outside of the ring and reveals that it's actually Raven dressed as Mortis. Then he grabs a mic and he berates Saturn for losing. Saturn attacks him but gets jumped by the Flock. But then Saturn cleans house. The match went 14 minutes, 46 seconds. Meltzer gave it 2.5 stars. I got to think the star rating suffered from the match going on a little too long and the multiple Mortises being involved in the finish but not involved. Like I said, they didn't do anything. The Saturn and Kanyon rather, they didn't even acknowledge that these 2 Mortis clones were out there. They kind of looked and was like, okay, back to our business. They didn't touch them. They didn't distract them. It was pointless. Chris Jericho versus Dean Malenko for the vacant WCW Cruiserweight title is next. It's a shame that Peacock has dubbed over Jericho's music and we don't get the even flow cover. Instead, we get the WWE, WWF Jericho music, Break the Walls Down, which is a great tune, but it's not authentic. That's not what Jericho was doing at the time. Oh well. Malenko's out second, and the crowd serenades Jericho immediately with Jericho Sucks chants. And just like the matches before this, though, this match features 2 of the all-time greats. Jericho obviously gets his credit and his flowers. He's still doing it. Everybody appreciates Jericho. Maybe not as much as they should. I think it's time to have the conversation. Jericho's probably cemented himself as at least a top 10 wrestler all time. You can make the case higher. But he obviously gets his flowers. But Dean Malenko, severely underrated. Severely underrated. Such a great technical wrestler. The finish of this match comes when Jericho tells Malenko that he's nothing, just like his dead father, and Malenko just snapped. You know, Malenko's gimmick at the time was the Iceman. Never showed any emotions, was just tactical. But he lost his cool in this one. He snaps, he attacks Jericho with a chair, he gets disqualified, and then he continues fighting Jericho and beating him up the entrance ramp, through the back, outside the arena. Jericho ends up escaping, running across the street and escaping into another building. That was a lot of fun. Jericho officially wins the match by disqualification just under 14 minutes. Meltzer gave it 3 stars. And then the next night on Nitro, so they didn't do it here. Commentary speculated, but the next night on Nitro, Jericho was officially awarded the Cruiserweight title since he did, in fact, win the match. Okay, I don't hate that. That's fine. Backstage again now, and Eddie Guerrero's with Lee Marshall this time, and he's talking for the website about how he doesn't want to fight Chavo. It's not what the family would want. But then, what in the hell is this vignette we get for Juventud Guerrera? We get this like very Latino or Mexican sounding guitar music playing, and we just see Juventud walking around an outdoor setting, like he's walking up some steps, and then he's sitting on the steps, and he fades. They fade his picture in and out. It's just pointless. He doesn't say a word. Nothing is accomplished. It just looks like this cheap dramatic scene from some low-rate Mexican soap opera. It's just terrible. Why? But his match is next, so I guess that's why to show us, hey, Juventud's next, but we didn't need that. If you want filler for a minute or however long that took, just throw to Shivani and have him talk about anything. Talk about the Bash at the Beach, which is the next pay-per-view. Talk about anything. Anyway, Juventud's out first. Like I said, he's set to face Reese from the Flock. You got a huge size difference here. Juventud is billed at 5'7", 165 pounds. Reese is 7'2", 410 pounds. The match sucked. 8 minutes, 45 seconds. That's way too long. Meltzer agreed that it sucks. He gave it a -1 star, his lowest rating of this entire pay-per-view. Completely fair and warranted. The highlight in this one was Bobby Heenan on commentary. He says that Reese has feet like Lanier. Not Bob Lanier, Lake Lanier. That's good stuff. And then Reese was standing on Juventud's hair at one point, and Heenan says, that'll ruin your perm. So that's just good. You know, shout out to Bobby Heenan. Love and miss him, like I said. The finish of this one comes when Van Hammer hits Reese in the back with a chair, and Juvi hits a Hurricane Rana and gets the pin. But Reese's shoulder was not down. Camera captured it clearly. Ref was out of position, counted the 3, didn't worry about his shoulder being down. Whatever. Okay, next. Speaking of next, it's time. We've got Eddie and Chavo talking to Lee Marshall, so let's get their match underway. Chavo Guerrero's out, and he's ready for his match against Uncle Eddie. Eddie's out second. And when this match started, it made me realize that the last match was actually placed perfectly. Yes, it sucked, but it was a cool-off match before this one because this is a good match. You don't want the crowd to be too amped up to where they can't appreciate what they're seeing. That was a perfect placement for that piece of crap. Chavo was definitely the aggressor in this one, and Eddie acted as if he didn't want to have to fight his nephew, so classic stuff there. There was a classic Eddie Guerrero spot in this one also where Chavo chased Eddie around the ring a few times, and then Eddie rolled back in the ring and hid behind referee Mickey J. And when Chavo moved Mickey J, Eddie hit a chop block on Chavo, so that's perfect. That's vintage Eddie Guerrero. I miss Eddie so much. Chavo hits a springboard tornado DDT to actually get the win in 14 minutes, 46 seconds. This was a very fun match. Had some good psychology, some good storytelling. Meltzer gave it 3 stars. I enjoyed it a lot. 3 stars may be low. 3 stars may be fair. I don't know. Don't care about star ratings in this one. That's a fun match. Next, they show a video package from this last week's Nitro where Piper and Macho Man were talking about how they don't trust each other, but they got to get through this tag match. And, they agreed to a fight after the match. Okay. Just doesn't make sense. Why put them together? I mean, this is exactly what I was talking about at the time with WCW just being too convoluted. Yes, they're both baby faces, but one's a Wolfpack member, one's WCW. Why put them together? Why not put 2 WCW guys, 2 Wolfpack guys? Why even have the Wolfpack? This is exactly what I was talking about. Prime example. The TV title match is next. You got Booker T. He's fighting his second match of the night, and he gets his title shot against Fit Finlay. And I know a lot of people listening to this may think that Booker T versus Fit Finlay sounds like a Teddy Long special from SmackDown on the CW, but this was long before those days. Good stuff here. Finlay attacked the knee much more than Benoit did in the opener, so that's great storytelling. He really worked on the knee for majority of the match, and I appreciate that because Heenan sold it and he put the knee injury over well in the opener, so for Finlay to do that, that's great stuff. There was a pretty bad botch in this one. Booker was meant to reverse a tombstone piledriver from Finlay, but he fell, and then he stood back up and tried to pick Finlay up off the mat in a tombstone position, but just couldn't, fell again. So instead of that, they go to the finish and kind of improvise a different kind of piledriver, which came across looking a little awkward. He did it in a tombstone style, but Finlay was facing the other way, and so it just looked like an awkward piledriver. But he got the win. It was a bad ending to an otherwise solid match. 13 minutes, 13 seconds. Meltzer gave it 2.25 stars. It is what it is. I enjoyed it for what it was. But this is great storytelling for Booker. He had been the underdog. He gets his solo title now. It's kind of signifying the transition between Harlem Heat and being one of the greatest tag teams ever to now let's see what we got in Booker T as a single star. Next up, yeah, it is what it is. Look, you got Conan. He's making his way to the ring representing the Wolfpack, which I love Conan in the Wolfpack. When I think of Conan, I think of the Wolfpack. That may be because I think it was 99 Halloween. It may have been 98, but I had brain surgery in October of 98, so I don't think it was that year. But one of those years, I went as Conan for Halloween. Had the flannel, had the black sagging jeans, had the fedora, the sunglasses, the Wolfpack shirt. So, yeah, big Conan fan. And he's got Kurt Hennig and Rick Rude accompanying him to the ring. Hennig was supposed to be in this match, but he's out with a knee injury, so Conan's going to be subbing in and facing Goldberg for the U.S. title. Goldberg enters the match 99-0, which, if you didn't know, I'm going to spoil something for you. That number is nowhere near accurate. They kept adding phantom wins here and there to pad his stats to make it more impressive. Like he would go from 50 wins on Nitro to by the time we got to Thunder a few days later, he's at 64 wins. It is what it is. I don't hate that. I'm not mad at that at all. Anyway, I was like 9 or 10 during this match, and I loved Goldberg at the time. He was such a badass. But looking back, man, he sucked. He just couldn't wrestle. He was just intense and had a great look. I'm not denying that he was over either. Insanely over. The crowd was deafening with the Goldberg chants. But this match is just a disservice to Conan, though. Conan was so good in the ring. But this match is over in under 2 minutes. Goldberg hits his usual spots. He gets the win. He improves to 100-0. Got a half a star from Meltzer. I agree. Half a star is all it's worth. After the match, Hennig and Rick Rude turned on Conan, and they beat him down, and then Hennig took off his Wolfpack shirt to reveal an NWO Hollywood shirt. And then Luger and Nash ran in to make the save, shoot off Rude and Hennig, and, we're done with that. Okay. Next, we get a promo. It's a little commercial for Bash at the Beach. It's our next pay-per-view that we have from WCW coming the next month. And, man, how great are these old WCW pay-per-view commercials? Go back and watch that one. It's short, silly, fun. When we go back to the arena, Michael Buffer is in the ring now. And he's going to introduce the next match. Macho Man Randy Savage is out first, representing the Wolfpack. And Buffer mentions how he and Piper are only united for their hatred of their opponents. And then Piper's bagpipes hits, and he's out. And Buffer repeats the same line about how their mutual hatred of their opponents is their only common factor. That was weird. Michael Buffer, I thought was much better on the mic than he was on this show. It's like he didn't have any material and just kind of had a couple lines and winged the rest. Didn't come across as great. But then the NWO theme hits, and Bret Hart and Hollywood Hogan make their way out, and the Disciple's in tow, and he's carrying the belt. Something weird about here that I'm not sure, since I watched this on Peacock, is if I'm thinking back, if it's 1998 and Hulk Hogan's come to the ring, I'm pretty sure it would have been Jimi Hendrix Voodoo Child. So I think the network has dubbed over that entrance theme as well because they don't have the rights to that song. But I think it was Jimi Hendrix that we were supposed to be hearing as Hogan played his belt like a guitar and Bret Hart walked out looking like he wanted to be anywhere else but WCW. Anyway, back to here. Bret Hart, speaking of being, disinterested looking, he was so misused in WCW. How could he not be? He shouldn't have been with the NWO. He shouldn't have been seconding Hulk Hogan. He should have been facing Hulk Hogan at this pay-per-view for the belt and being crowned the new champ. He's Bret Hart. He just ruled New York for the past, 2, 3, 4 years, and he comes down south, and you're going to treat him like that. You're going to stick him in a faction that's way too muddied anyway, and you're going to put him in a meaningless tag match. Okay, that's fine. And by the way, he hated Hulk Hogan. He's very vocal about that, which I get it. Bret Hart kind of hates everyone, but he didn't like Hogan, but you're going to make him work with him and whatever. It just doesn't work for me. And I guess that, having to lose the belt at a pay-per-view to Bret Hart, that didn't work for Hogan, brother. So that's never going to happen. Oh, well. Piper and Savage, they look cohesive early on. They got multiple quick tags. They look like a very well-oiled machine as a tag team unit. And they work over Hogan for quite a while until the Disciple hits Piper in the back with the title belt, and the NWO turns the tables, and they dominate Piper for a while. Nick Patrick missed multiple tags and wouldn't let Savage in the match. Like every time Piper was trying to tag out, Patrick would be dealing with the NWO and have his back turned. So that's good stuff. Classic referee move there. Nick Patrick was a great referee. Savage finally does hit the hot tag, and he cleans house. The match breaks down. All 4 guys are in the ring, and Piper's Irish whipped into the ropes, which knocks Savage off, and Savage falls and grabs at his knee. Hogan then wraps Savage's knee around the ring post, so they've targeted that limb. And then Bret Hart, what's coming next. He locks in the sharpshooter. He gets the win by submission. Savage taps out. 11 minutes, 40 seconds. Too long. Meltzer gave it a dud rating. I mean, that's a little harsh. It wasn't good. I'm not saying that it was, but it wasn't that bad. 0 stars or a dud rating. That's come on. Look at the names involved, if nothing else. It served a purpose for what they were trying to do and where they were trying to go with Savage and Piper. I'd probably give it around 1.5 stars. I mean, 0 is a little low. But then after the match, Mean Gene gets in, and he asks Piper what's going on between them and how Piper could possibly go forward with a one-on-one match now. Piper helps Savage up, but Savage just decks him, and then the bell sounds. Savage hits the elbow from the top rope, but his knee hurts too much to pin immediately, and Piper's able to kick out. Savage then knocks out referee Charles Robinson. What a bump he took. And then Piper locked in the figure 4. Referee Mickey J runs in, and he calls for the bell. We got a submission. Should have been a DQ, to be honest with you, since, Charles Robinson got decked. But it's a loss regardless. Another dud from Meltzer, so back-to-back duds involving Roddy Piper and Randy Savage on this pay-per-view. That's crazy. The match went about 1.5 minutes. The dud is warranted on this one. I will say that. Next up, traditional NWO music hits, and it's time for our other main event, the actual main event, the last match on the card. The Giant walks out, and he lights a cigarette to smoke on his way to the ring. Okay. Mike Tenay mentions how it has to be in response to Sting, because Sting has said how the Giant needs to get in better shape, and he doesn't take anything seriously. He needs to stop smoking. So the Giant smoked a cigarette on the way to the ring. That's crazy to see. Sting is out next, and look, Wolfpack Sting was so fire to me as a kid. Sting is my favorite wrestler of all time. But looking back, he just should have never been involved in either side of the NWO. Like I said, he's WCW. The bell sounds, and the Giant's still smoking a cigarette in the ring, and he walks over and casually blows smoke in Sting's face. Tenay also mentions how the Giant has already said if he wins, the Disciple is going to be his tag team partner and by default co-champion. And then they speculate that Sting will probably pick Lex Luger since, they've got the long history of being friends and partners. Giant gets the upper hand early on, and he physically dominated Sting. Sting turns the tide and ends up locking the Giant in the Scorpion Deathlock, but Giant just powers out. It's too strong, too big. Sting then hits a Scorpion Death Drop, but the Giant kicks out. He hits another one. The Giant kicks out. And then Sting climbs on the second rope, or he climbs on the Giant, rather, from the second rope and hits a Scorpion Death Drop again. I think it was meant to look better than it did. I think he was supposed to swing off the second rope and hit it so it looked like it had more impact, but instead he just jumped on his back from the second rope, came down to the mat, collected himself, and hit one last Scorpion Death Drop. Giant can't kick out of this one. Sting gets the win. He wins possession of the tag team titles. Commentary says we'll probably find out who his choice for partner will be tomorrow on Nitro. Despite how obvious a choice it seemed for Sting to pick Lex Luger, I mean, like I said, they were partners and friends for most of this decade in the 90s. Kevin Nash was actually the tag team partner that he chose, and he and Sting would be the tag team champs until the next month when the Giant and Scott Hall would win the belts on an episode of Nitro. Okay. I mean, you're doing so much with the NWO at this time, Eric Bischoff, so why not? Why not let that be what happens? The match went 6 minutes, 40 seconds. Meltzer gave it an appropriate rating, 1.25 stars, and that's that. Last match, roll credits. So our RVD 5-star moment, I'm going to give it, honestly, Bobby Heenan's performance on commentary was a close runner-up, but I'm going to give it to Chris Jericho and Dean Malenko. Because number one, like I said, they're two of the best to ever lace their boots, but it was so much fun. Seeing them fight outside the arena and then Jericho run through traffic and then escape into a building across the street, that's just fun stuff. That's great. Something that didn't make sense about it, though, and Eric Bischoff pointed this out on his podcast, 83 Weeks, is WCW head of security at the time, Doug Dillinger. He was out there. Why? He's head of security. He should be breaking up this fight. It's after the bell. Instead, he was just standing there in every camera shot letting them fight. And then there was also a referee out there. Why? It's not a match. What are you going to do? But it doesn't take away from it for me. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. The Shockmaster Award this week goes to that weird vignette we got for Juventud Guerrera. It served absolutely no purpose. Not even for a filler because it lasted, like I said, a minute or so. Maybe less than a minute. So it was just the definition of pointless. So that's the show. I'll be back in 2 weeks. Going to get back to our regular schedule. I know this is 2 weeks in a row with an episode, but that was due to difficulties, not choice. So we're going to take a week off, and I'll be back in 2 weeks. I'm going to hit you with our poll options. I'll put these out on Twitter, of course, at @loreofthering_. Follow me on Twitter, at @DMFrank_. And our poll options for this next one, we're going to go back to the land of the extreme, back to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, back to ECW. Poll option number 1. I got a feeling this one's going to win because I've had a couple people mention this show. I'll reserve my thoughts on the show until it does win a poll. But poll option number 1 is ECW One Night Stand 2006. 2005 was such a success as a quote-unquote one-off that Vince McMahon and the WWE decided to run it back. The card features Taz versus Jerry Lawler, Rey Mysterio versus Sabu, and John Cena versus Rob Van Dam. Poll option number 2 is ECW November to Remember from 1995. Some matches on that card. You've got Rey Mysterio versus Psychosis. You've got Mikey Whipwreck versus Steve Austin before he was Stone Cold. And Terry Funk and Tommy Dreamer versus Cactus Jack and Raven. Poll option number 3 is going to be ECW Heatwave 98. On this card, you've got Chris Candido versus Lance Storm, Taz versus Bam Bam Bigelow, and Tommy Dreamer, Sandman, and Spike Dudley versus Bubba Ray, Devon, and Big Dick Dudley. Last poll option 4, is going to be Heatwave 2000. This has got Tajiri versus Mikey Whipwreck versus Little Guido versus Psychosis in a fatal 4-way match. You've got Rhino versus the Sandman and Justin Credible versus Tommy Dreamer. So be on the lookout for that poll. Continue to hit me with your feedback. Continue to share the show. Help me grow the audience if you enjoy it. Tell someone. Picked up a few new listeners in the past week and who didn't know I did a wrestling podcast. Shout out to you for listening now. I appreciate it. Tell a friend. Follow me on Twitter. Interact with me. I appreciate it, and I love it all. But with that, WCW, the Great American Bash 1998, is down for the 3 count. And so long from the Volunteer State.
Wolfpack is back, cause I'm mass destruction. Guess who's here? The bad boys of wrestling. Testing competition, win the war, that's their mission. Not no mercy, see the rings like the street. If you don't know